Rose Savidge is a self-leadership coach, senior design manager, and host of the Follow Yourself Experiment podcast. With over 25 years in the fashion industry, she has led design teams, developed collections, and worked at the intersection of creativity, innovation, and responsible product development. Her work brings together strategic thinking, creative direction, and a belief that there is always a better way to build. Alongside her design leadership career, Rose runs a coaching practice supporting thoughtful, high-performing people through moments of transition, particularly when what they've built no longer feels fully aligned. Her podcast, The Follow Yourself Experiment, sits at the center of her work. Through conversations with founders, creatives, athletes, and changemakers, she explores what it really means to lead yourself and create the life you want. Across everything she does, Rose's work is grounded in values-led leadership, helping people reconnect with what matters to them, make clearer decisions, and build a life that genuinely fits. Welcome to Season 4 of the 5 Bed Podcast. I am so excited to have Rose Savidge with me today. I have known Rose for, 20 years now, and we worked together kind of back in the day, but reconnected quite recently, and I've been so fascinated by your journey, by your work as a senior design manager, and your work with the circular economy. And I just knew that I had to have you on as my first guest of this new series. But I wondered if you could start by introducing yourself properly.
Yeah, sure. Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm Rose Savidge, as you say. I'm a senior design manager. I've got 25 years experience in fashion and textiles. I'd say the last sort of 15 of those has been spent focused on innovation, sustainability, those kind of things. I'm also a self-leadership coach, and I have a podcast called Follow Yourself Experiment, all about kind of values-led leadership.
And we will put a link to your podcast because it is amazing. And I think the people that you've had on it are absolutely fascinating. So loads to learn from there. But I wanted to maybe start in terms of how you've seen the industry change. Because when we worked together, 20 years ago, I thought you were very visionary then. But, the world has changed so much. There's a increased focus on sustainability, but have you seen it change as somebody who was kind of at the forefront of it?
Oh, hugely. And thank you. It's really lovely for you to say that you thought I was visionary then. It's funny looking back and you don't see it, I suppose. But yeah, I guess the early part of my career was spent on the UK high street. So I graduated university in 2002, and the British high street was absolutely booming. I worked for, my first couple of jobs were for suppliers, which we used to joke that we were at the kind of bottom of the fashion food chain, but actually as hard as those jobs were, they made me incredibly technical, and my training was textiles, so the technical side of it I always loved. And then I kind of worked for high street brands from there, which is where we met Joe. And I loved it. I really loved it. I ended up with a brand that was I guess at the time, they were a high street brand, but they had a really good reputation for treating people really well, treating their factories really well, having slightly higher price points and more design details. And they were kind of the brand that everyone wanted to work for. And I was so chuffed to get a job there, and I loved it. I think the first 5 years there were amazing. And then the 2008 recession hit, and it just changed overnight. I just felt like everything we did changed overnight. I felt like we were trying to compete with everybody else. Our kind of handwriting changed, our quality of the fabrics changed, and it just felt like we were really in the rest of the high street in that kind of soup. And I also saw people that I really, really admired get made redundant in quite a nasty way. And I just thought, this is not for me. I was like, I don't want a part of this. This does not sit comfortably with me at all. So I just left. I left London. I left my job and I had absolutely nothing to go to. And I thought, I'm going to move to Cornwall. And I really thought at that point that I was going to do something completely different. And actually, I got contacted about work a couple of weeks before we left London. And from there, built my own kind of consultancy, I suppose. I freelanced, I consulted, worked with universities, and really hit a point quite early on in that where I thought, actually, I only want to work with ethical, sustainable brands now. That's, it felt in the early days, I still did a bit of the London work, but I was working with more ethical, sustainable brands as well. And it just didn't sit right. It didn't sit right speaking from the heart one day and then compromise it. It felt like I was just compromising my values the next. So, and that was quite a hard thing to do because there was a salary involved with that had to be cut. But I thought, no, that's the only way forward. And I actually rebranded at that point and called my business And Family, because it was really important to me that whoever I would work for, so the company name was ... and Family. So it would be the name of whoever I was working with and family, because building those relationships was so important to me and always has been through my whole career. And I think that comes from the supplier days at the beginning where I would work on the factory floor and get to know people. And so that was a big turning point, really. And I guess that's where being values led started. I mean, I guess it's in me without knowing. And that's kind of where my coaching has come from. And the podcast that I do now, which is all about listening to yourself and following yourself. Because I think if I'd have been aware of that earlier, I'd have got myself into a better place earlier. And I think it's so easy to fall into other tracks. But in terms of sustainability, that and circularity, I guess I've wanted to make change for a long time. Like that was a really early driver. I think when everything changed for me in 2008, it was a real I don't want to be part of this system, how it exists right now.
I mean, the word that I've written down there, Rose, is courage. I mean, that must have taken a lot of courage to just think, I've had enough. Because I would say, especially now, there's probably a lot of people in the fashion industry who think that daily. So, I mean, what made you take that leap? Was it just like something where you thought, I just absolutely can't do it? And it sounds now that you've really understood what that means and how aligned it was, but kind of how did that journey go from understanding, it's because it's really against my values, to I'm going to hand in my notice?
Yeah. I don't think I even recognized then that it was a values decision. I think it's only looking back on it. And actually, if I'm honest, it's probably only since I started coaching that I've looked back and gone, oh, that's what that was. I mean, I was, what was it? I would have been 28. And I think at that point, I probably wasn't even thinking that way. I just knew that I didn't want to be a part of it. It was like, I guess it was a feeling. I'm a very feelings-led person, and that feeling of going in every day and it just being like, this just is not right. It was an easier thing to do. I didn't have any children, and my partner at the time, we did have a flat in London, so we thought, well, we can just rent it out, and if it all goes horribly wrong, we'll just move back to London and get other jobs. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I have looked back on this a lot recently myself and thought, was it brave? But I guess the other thing that I've only come to realize recently in myself is that actually I just had a belief that it would be okay. I knew that I'm a hard worker, and I knew that if I wanted something, I'd make it work. And 16 years later, I'm still in Cornwall making it work. So it works. It's been a journey along the way, but I got there.
But I think there's so many people listening to this that will really appreciate how honest you've been, and to say, do you know what, it can work out and there's something on the other side of this? Because I think there's a lot of people who do get stuck in jobs where every day they're just going in and just doing what they need to do. And I don't know about you, but I think the fashion industry has changed so much. Where it was about creativity and quality and really kind of sweating a product, now it just seems very much of a fast turnover, get something out, you know, look at what the competition's doing and almost do it better and cheaper. And so for people who are kind of stuck in that situation, I think it's great that actually there's another way to look at this. And I'm really interested by what you said, that you made that conscious decision that actually you were only going to work with ethical brands. Because again, that's not an easy thing to do, especially going to Cornwall where there might not have been a load of different clients there to actually kind of say, I'm going to be so focused on who I work with. Again, I think that's quite a courageous decision. And how did you kind of stay true to that? You know, I'm sure there's times where it got a bit difficult and you thought, you know, do I need to take work that I don't believe in or not? How did you kind of stay true to what you really set out to do?
Yeah. Before I answer that bit, I'm going to go back on what you said there about in the early days it feeling more creative and people feeling more, tied to price points and things now. But actually, I found in the early days that, particularly when that recession hit, that actually we were just like seeing amazing mills for fabrics and yarns and things, and actually just sending them off to other countries to rip them off. And I had a real problem with that. And it felt like we were copying everything, and it didn't feel, it didn't feel so creative. And I think what I love about where I've gone, where the point where I was like, I'm only going to work with ethical, sustainable brands, is that, there is funding for things these days that there wasn't back then. So I've been really lucky to work with York University. I've been working with them for years now on a project and about kind of developing a really exciting yarn. And those opportunities weren't available then. And that feels much more creative to me. Like, it's much slower. It's a really slow process, but it's really exciting. And I think kind of today, like looking at sustainability and the brands that I've worked with, it's really exciting to see those projects coming through to fruition. And there are people doing it. So it's hard, but it does happen. And then, sorry, I've gone off on the first part of the question and forgotten the second part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fascinating, and I want to kind of dig into that more in a minute, because you are such an expert on circular economy. I'm kind of like holding back on that, but it was more around staying true to your values. So when you decided to only work with ethical brands, how did you not compromise on that?
I just didn't. I think I'm like, I don't know. I don't think stubborn's the word, but I am definitely a hard worker and I am very tenacious. And I think maybe there's a little bit of me, I don't know if it's almost naivety, where, you know, when you're brought up and you're told that you can do anything, and it's kind of always stuck with me. So if that's what I've decided, I'll just make it work, because that's the only option. You can't put yourself out as a business that only works with ethical and sustainable brands and then wobble. Like, doesn't work. You won't get any customers. So you just have to sort of then become, an expert in your field, I suppose. And that becomes your messaging and the things that is important to you, and the materials that you use along that journey then change. They become, you're using different mills, you're using different fibers, you're using different dye techniques. So your knowledge changes. So you kind of, in a way, also do yourself out of a job on the high street, because you're not connected in that world so well anymore. It's easier to jump in that way than the other way. But your knowledge is not so strong. And then people get to know that you're good at that and that you're the person for that. And it grows from there, I suppose.
And you've talked about being an expert in your field. And Rose, like I've said, for many years, I've kind of looked up to you because of the work that you've done, and I want to say you have been quite stubborn in terms of saying, you know, like there's got to be a better way. Like in your introduction, you kind of said there's always a better way to build. And I think you are testament to making that happen. And I think part of that is your experience and your due diligence in knowing the supply chain and maybe having started off, within a supplier, but also your leadership in terms of influencing others. Because I guess when you're in a system where other people don't really believe in this, it's hard to be the only one who does really drive it. So I'm kind of interested to dig in, kind of your thoughts on the circular economy, but B, also how you lead organizations through that.
Yeah, I mean, tenacity, I guess, is the thing. I just, and it can probably be frustrating for people around me sometimes, if I'm honest, but I will just get locked into something. And if it's something that I think is possible, like I will just make it happen. And I think sometimes that can be annoying for other people because I can be a little bit like, well, sod the process. We'll do it. That if we do it the process way, it's never going to happen. So I can go a bit rogue, I suppose, sometimes. But that's what I find exciting, to be honest. Like the possibilities in life are endless. They just are. And if we follow processes, we're not always going to find the possibility. Like you have to look outside of that. You have to go beyond it, and you have to believe that it's possible. Like that has to be the starting point. And then, and then you join the dots from there, I suppose. I think Stephen Covey has an amazing book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful, Influential People. And one of them is that you start with the end in mind. And again, in my coaching, it's something we use a lot, but it's true in innovation projects as well. It's like, right, what do we want the end point to be? And you just don't lose focus of it. And then really it's just a case of filling in the dots from there. And often it's a lot of conversations and talking to people. And I mean, I just love that because you meet experts about the most unusual things. You meet people along the way that are just fascinating. And that really lights my fire, like people that are really into something. And often on these projects, they're passionate people and they're visionaries, and they're kind of the outliers in many ways. And actually just talking to them in the right kind of sequence or even putting them then in the right kind of sequence will then get you to the end result. And often, actually, when you strip it back, it's not as difficult as it seems. I mean, obviously, there are sciences out there and there are things that are more difficult. But in terms of fiber and, making kind of textile projects happen, it's often just, being a little bit rogue and excited and tenacious, I think.
I mean, I kind of want to say it's also more than that, though, because there's a lot of people who would meet all these people and not be able to maybe structure it in an order that's going to make sense. There's a lot of people who would be energized by those conversations, but then have to take it back to their client and think, I feel like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall because it's not getting through. And I know you've spoken on LinkedIn, don't know if you're happy to speak about it here, about your dyslexia, but also this idea of creative leadership. And I really believe that there's some people who are able to visualize different ways of working with systems and process. And I really kind of feel like you're one of them. And that's part of your success, to get something that potentially is really complex. Like, how do we make this product circular? But put it in a way that can convince the client to go and adopt that, and put it in a way that actually works so you get an end product. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit about, creative leadership, your neurodiversity, and maybe some of the ways that that's benefited you, maybe some of the ways that that's challenged you.
Yeah, sure. I love that you asked about that. I'm very happy to talk about dyslexia. I am very dyslexic. I didn't discover it, or I didn't get diagnosed until I was 42. So it was very late on in life. And I have always felt like I see the world differently. I've sat in meeting rooms and I've thought, but it's much more simple than that. You just do this, this, and this. Or equally, there are times when I'm the person in the room that finds things more difficult to understand. And I certainly can't read out loud very well, which is a big sign of dyslexia. But yeah, seeing solutions to things and problem solving is very, very natural to me. And I put this down for a long time to the fact that I've always had to do it. So for a dyslexic person, we do see the world differently. And so you're always problem solving to try and fit in with everybody else. So you become naturally very, very good at it. But actually, GCHQs, like my favorite dyslexic fact, they employ dyslexic people because they're so good at problem solving. It is a skill that we have. And I guess in leadership, it helps in the same way. So I was very lucky to go on a course of creative leadership at the Royal College with Rama Guerrero, and I apologise if I've not said his surname properly. He was absolutely brilliant. And it was a 2-day course, and I just found it fascinating. For the first time, I felt like I was sat in a room of someone talking to me about leadership in a way that made absolute sense to me. And I just thought, right, I'm not mad. I'm not seeing things differently. And it really kind of gave me a confidence. And it was, I've said to Rama as well, it was really the thing that started my route as a coach in many ways, because creative leadership really is about, a big part of it is empathy and understanding people and things and taking time. And in traditional leadership, there's not really a place for that. But actually, in having empathy, you get to the root of the problem much better. So, you know, one of the things I've talked about is that I love talking to people about what they do. It fascinates me. People are fascinating, and often, you know, you meet someone on surface level, but you have a short conversation with them, and there's so much more depth than that. And really, that's what creative leadership is. It's not just looking at the formulas on a piece of paper. It's like talking to people and saying, right, so what's the problem? Where are the roadblocks? And then sitting with them and saying, well, if you were in this situation, how would you figure it out? You know, and then of course your role is to push that through for the people above you as well. So again, which I do think my tenacity helps with that. And I don't know, I mean, you called me brave earlier. I wouldn't have said that, but maybe there's just an element of but that's the way it is. I mean, I'm neurodivergent, so maybe I am a little bit like, but this is just the way that it is, you know. And maybe that helps push it through. But yeah, I think one of the biggest unlocks in my life was because I'd suspected I was dyslexic for years, but actually knowing it. And I went to have the test, and I sat down and I started doing it. And it's quite funny, a dyslexia test. It's really long, and they kind of slowly break you down during the test. And I started off and I thought, oh my God, I am acing this. Like, this guy is never going to think I'm dyslexic. He's going to be like, you are wasting my time. By the end of it, I was in tears. I was like, this is so hard. I did actually cry. I was like, this is so hard. And then when we finished, he said, well, it was very clear from the very beginning that you are dyslexic. So even when I thought I was acing it, I was, I absolutely was not. And I think that was just a moment of like, right, all those things that I felt all of my life, the way that I see things, other people don't see things like that. And for me, that was like so exciting. It was like, I have this skill that no one else has. And I found that incredibly empowering. And I learned a lot about dyslexia. An irony, I read up on it, but, and I wanted to understand it. And by doing that, I understood the bits that applied to me. And, I found it really empowering. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to try and push the stuff that I'm not so good at anymore. and I know that I'm good at this stuff. So that's the bit that I'm going to follow. So yeah, it was a huge moment for me.
I love that. I'm a fellow dyslexic, so I completely agree with everything that you've said. And I think, I mean, for me, it was really important to see it as a strength. I mean, people talk about it as a superpower. Kate Griggs has Made by Dyslexia, which is a brilliant resource. But I think it especially when you are working in creative industries, or you are trying to problem solve or do something that hasn't been done before, i.e. something like a circular economy, you need these people who see things differently. We're trying to do something that doesn't at the moment exist, and you need visionaries. And I think it's so vital. And I also think as you as a coach, to bring that different perspective must help so many of your clients. And I'm really interested to dig into your coaching, because you coach so many great people. What's your biggest lesson you've learned through that coaching?
Oh, it's a great question. I think to listen, to be honest. One of your biggest jobs as a coach is to listen and not to give advice. And, when you're sort of training to become a coach, that can be quite a difficult thing to do. But actually it's really exciting. And it sort of goes back to what I was saying a minute ago. But when I was training, I remember saying in one of the classes, but okay, so you're not giving advice, but you can still ask questions that would basically lead to the advice that you would give. And I was like, that sort of borderlines on coercive behavior. So I was like, how do we navigate that? And one of the things they said was, be curious, just be curious. Like, you don't know what another person is going to say. You actually have no idea. And that has been a huge lesson, that actually no matter how informed you think you might be, you don't know the answer. And often they don't before they say it as well. And that's the point of coaching, is that you should help them get to places that they've not dug down into before. But as I was saying that, I was thinking, well, I guess that's relevant as well for circular economy, innovation projects, all of those things.
Definitely. I was just thinking that because I know that on your LinkedIn, you shared some kind of key lessons from the creative leadership course. And one of them was about time, allowing time for ideas to generate, but, and balancing individuals and group and the different amount of time that they may need. But within that, it's also listening and making sure you're open with non-judgment, and it's a lot easier to say than it is to do. And especially when you're a subject matter expert, you can assume that everybody is at the same point as you on the journey, or at least has an interest in this. And you can go into a lot of companies who don't get it, aren't interested in it. And I'm curious to kind of dig into more about the circular economy with you, because you are such an expert on it. What are your thoughts on it? Progress wise, do you think it is feasible? What are the blockers? What are the barriers? Like, keen to get your unfiltered view on it, Rose.
Yeah, sure. Well, again, I'm going to go back to a little bit that you said there about time, because I want to talk about that. But on the course, the bit that you're talking about in LinkedIn, Rama and his team put this incredible graph together that was like how we should approach meetings. And it's that you start with whatever the conversation is. And then, so you start with a group, you talk about it, and then everyone goes away and thinks about it individually. And then when you come back together, you listen to everyone around the table, let everyone talk, let them have their time. And then you go apart, and you do that 2 or 3 times before you land on the final goal, I suppose, or the final way that you plan to execute it. And that, I think, is so clever, because so often, we find ourselves in all walks, whether it be work, at home, or whatever, rushing to make decisions. And then we have to double back and change them. And it's such a time drain. And actually just giving some time up front is really, really important. And there's also, which I talk about all the time, so this I think has been on my LinkedIn as well, the most incredible book by Nancy Klein called Time to Think. And she talks about having thought spaces, and, you know, the way that we approach meetings, and again, giving people time to think. And often when there's silence, people jump in to fill it. But actually, if you speak to someone and you let the silence sit, they're actually just processing the answer, and they will come up with something that never might have happened otherwise, because someone else otherwise has interrupted them and changed the trajectory of the conversation. So yeah, that is a phenomenal book as well. And then in terms of where the circular economy is going, I think it's difficult. There are real challenges. You know, it takes time to develop these things. There's a lot of startups happening at the moment. You know, we have a huge amount of fabrics that are they're not mono fabrics, they're blends. So, you know, we're dealing with years of history that's really literally hard to unravel in order to make circular. So it's very difficult. And on top of that, it costs more, which means that really the consumer has to pay more. You know, to run a circular, to sort of run a sustainable business, you have to have so many things in place. So it's tricky. It takes more time, and that costs more money.
So much I want to dig into there, Rose. I'm going to ask this question, but I'll park it for a second. Do you believe that will always be the case, in terms of it's always going to be more expensive? Because that's going to be the challenge that continually comes back. So that's my one question, because I'm always pioneering to be like, you know, we can't use that as an excuse. Like, yes, it might be true, but at some point we've got to see it as an additional like revenue stream, for example, through, say, circular economy business models. So eager to get kind of debunk that myth maybe, or prove it. But the other thing I wanted to ask about was, you know, you talked about in meetings allowing people the time to think. And I think often we're just not used to that culture of just being like, actually, we're going to be comfortable with the silence. Often somebody feels like they've got to say something to sound intelligent in the meeting, for example. And how do you create a company culture that enables that, so that people feel that they can be vulnerable enough to kind of sit with that silence for a little bit?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's hard in bigger meetings. But I guess you try to lead by example, is the best way, really. I think it's always helpful if people, you know, you mentioned Made by Dyslexia there. I like, it's brilliant. I follow them as well, and they're absolutely amazing. They also have done an amazing video that's on LinkedIn, and I'm going off, but it's relevant. And they talk about how actually the brain is different for dyslexic people. Like, it is actually neurologically different. And I think sometimes we forget that, or people forget that when they're talking about dyslexic people. And actually, you know, there is a neurological difference which makes us think differently. So we're not sort of making it up. And I've done a classic dyslexic thing and gone off on a tangent and forgotten what I was meant to be talking about. Meetings. So yes, there was a thing on Made by Dyslexia, and I've forgotten the guy who it was and the company that he worked from, but it's really remained with me. And he said that when they have meetings, everyone sits around and says what their job is in that meeting, what they're there, why they're there for meetings. And interestingly enough, he even took this one step further, and he said, I'm in meetings as a dyslexic thinker, and if we don't have a dyslexic thinker in the meeting, we find one in the business to get them in because of the way that they think. And I thought that was really interesting. That's kind of another level again. But I think equally, just by starting with the meeting and everyone saying, right, my name is this and I'm here for this reason, then when the conversation goes to them, everyone should pause and let them talk about the reason why they're, you know, the bit that they're there to cover. So I think sort of putting meeting structures and things like that in can be really helpful. It's difficult. It's difficult to do that always. But yeah, I think it's structuring that time to think into businesses.
By the way, when anybody listens to this podcast, it's going to be like two dyslexics on a topic. And then how many tangents could we go off? Like I literally printed something off and I was like, we're going to follow this structure. But to be fair, I feel like we cover far more interesting things kind of going off on a tangent. But I'm keen to kind of come back to you on the circular economy is always going to cost more. Do you think that's an excuse? Do you think that there is a linear model and a circular economy model that could go hand in hand through like repair and refurbish and all those other circular business models? Because I just feel like when I talk to clients and they're like, yeah, but it's too expensive, we're never going to be able to change the business model, it just becomes a barrier. So interested to know your thoughts on that.
It's definitely not an excuse, is what I would say. Like, it's definitely not. The due diligence and the work that has to go into being, truly kind of circular and sustainable is hard. Like, you've got more members of staff, there are more jobs happening. And let's not forget, in that model, you're ethical as well. So, people are getting paid properly. I think that there's still a lot of bad stuff that goes on in the fashion industry. So, yeah, it's a real thing. I don't know. I think it is more expensive, I guess, until it becomes the norm, which is, it's a classic thing, isn't it? If you buy 2 meters of a fabric, it will cost you a huge amount. If you buy 1,000 meters, the cost comes down. And it's kind of the same thing, I suppose. And the sad thing is that actually people having these conversations, it's still such a small percentage of what we're producing. And although the bigger brands are doing better things, they're really not doing enough. And for them to do it would be so easy. They've got the money, they've got really big, minimums that you can, big quantities, so is the word I'm looking for, that you can be pushing out, and that makes a huge difference. That kind of buying power, and it's still the smaller brands that care, that have a heart, that are values led, and it does affect the bottom line.
And do you think the reason why they don't do it is just purely profit? They don't want to sacrifice the margin?
Oh, I mean, I'm speculating, but yeah, I think so. At time as well, I suppose. We work in fast fashion. We live in a fast fashion world, and it, without doubt, slows everything down, which comes back to money. They want to churn it out because they want to make money. So sadly, I think it probably does.
What's the one myth about circular economy that you'd like to debunk?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know, really. I guess sometimes it can be seen as, maybe this is a bit of an outdated view, but that everyone's a bit kind of hemp wearing and, socks and sandals, which, socks and Birkies is a thing these days. So maybe some of that's true. But yeah, I think actually it is a really exciting industry, and there's a lot of science going on in it, and there's it's very future facing. And it's funny because it's almost like fast fashion can be like the sparkly pin that everyone thinks is the future. And actually, the work going on in sustainable fashion and circularity is much more progressive. So, yeah, I think it would probably be that.
Amazing. I've got a list of quick fire questions here for you, Rose. So,
get my buzzer.
Yeah. So here you go. One value you refuse to compromise on?
Oh my God, I'm such a values-led person. There's loads of them. Time with my children.
Love that. I'm not going to go into role models, Rose, but God, what role model you are for those 2 kids. Absolutely amazing. And I mean, I'm always fascinated by legacy, but I don't really know about your background, but the values that you were brought up with, you talk about tenacity and all that kind of stuff. I do feel like you get those in your childhood, when you're told you can go and do anything. And I think it's so beautiful that you live those for your kids as well. And I think that's how we create change, whether it's circular economy or whatever it is, to talk to our younger generation about challenging what is possible and what's the norm. I think it's amazing. Just want to say you're an amazing role model for that.
Oh, thank you very much.
One leadership habit that's had the biggest impact?
I think, again, listening to people, trying to remember that actually you don't have all the answers, not to barge in, take time.
If somebody is curious about the circular economy, where should they start? What's the first thing that you would suggest they start to do if they want a circular brand but literally don't know where to start?
I mean, it's to Google it, isn't it, these days, or ChatGPT it, or whatever it is that you do. ChatGPT probably isn't great for a circular economy, but I think that's probably the best place to start. It's look for sustainable brands, and I think this is something I talk about in my coaching a lot, and is really important. And that through those changes that I've been through, that we've mentioned, you have to step into that person. You have to become that person. So actually, if you want to start becoming more ethical and sustainable, look at your wardrobe, look at what you've got, and think about how much you spent on stuff. Because I'm telling you, if you've bought a t-shirt for £2.50, it's not ethical or sustainable. And yeah, I think to research clothing brands that you affiliate with the aesthetic or whatever is really important, and really to understand how precious this earth that we are on is. The fashion industry is doing a huge amount of damage to the world, and if we don't make changes, it will impact our children and our grandchildren in a terribly negative way. There's an amazing book that I'm reading at the moment called Less is More, and the author's name has just fallen out of my brain, but it's an incredible book, and it really talks about how we have to make change and actually focus on human flourishing rather than GDP. And it's those kind of changes. And really, if you understand your environment and if you have children or you care about the next generations, it's a really good motivator to make you more aware of what you're buying. And at the very least, if something is incredibly cheap, there is someone who is a person, a real life person with a real life family of their own, that isn't being paid enough money. And it's as simple as that in the supply chain. So I think, again, it just comes back to, caring about people and having empathy for what is on the things that we're putting on our bodies.
100%. And I think sometimes the difficult thing when people start to look at themselves and what they're doing is this guilt and shame that comes up, in this fact of, am I a hypocrite? And I think kind of when I look at you kind of from afar, I actually see somebody who has curated their life. Like, I've been to your home and you've got such beautiful things in it, but they're things that are so personal to you. It doesn't matter whether they're expensive or not. You have surrounded yourself with things that you love, not excessively. And I think that's the mind shift that I'm really interested in, is that it doesn't mean that we don't have to have anything or we have to feel guilty about stuff. It's actually just choosing what we want in our life and having things around us that bring us joy and happiness and that we want to see and wear and look at every day, and not necessarily having to buy 20 different things a month, for example. I think there's a bit of a mind shift there in terms of how people can adopt this in quite a positive way of looking at how curation rather than consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny, isn't it, that when someone says something like that, and I suppose I have in a way curated my life. As I say, I've kind of made quite strong decisions along the way, but I didn't realize at the time that those were happening. I feel much more focused on it now, but I come back to that Stephen Covey's quote, which is start with the end in mind. And I think ultimately, if you want a certain type of life, that's the life that you have to build. And my kids are my everything, as they are with a lot of parents, I'm sure. But it's me and my girls. We live, the three of us, and we've been that way for a long time, since they were very little. And they are absolutely my North Star. And it's like, is this decision going to be the best decision for me and my kids? That's always what I come back to. And yeah, I guess I'm a designer. I want nice things. And I appreciate nice things. I want beautiful things around me, and I want a beautiful life that's full of wonderful stuff. But I guess it's just thinking through it a bit more, not frivolous at all. And you will have seen when you came over, there's many gaps on my wall, because I know exactly what I'm looking for to fill that spot. And until I find the right thing and I have the money to buy the right thing, it will stay empty. And yeah, I think that's kind of the way that I work. I don't like excess in everything that I have. I suppose I like to have meaning or purpose behind. And yeah, again, this conversation's making me think, God, I'm really headstrong.
Yeah. I mean, I just find it fascinating, because the other thing I'm fascinated about is like the qualities within people that allow them to get to where they are. Like, it could be skills based or things that you've learned, but there's also innate qualities that drive you on your path. And when we kind of started this conversation, you talked about like this knowing that it was going to be okay. And like when I look at my walls, I'm always impatient to be like, I just need something, and I don't have the patience to wait. And actually for you, it's like, I know I'm going to find that thing that I need. I know it's going to come into my life. And even before kids, you kind of had this inner knowing without kind of knowing what it was, but knowing that actually this wasn't right and I'm going to make this change and it will work out. And God, I think there's something so special about that, and having that belief and having that confidence in yourself, whether it's tenacity, whether it's confidence, that so many people can learn from. Because I think in a lot of society, we don't necessarily encourage that conversation or those skills. We're fed a lot of things on social media about buy this and you'll look better or whatever it is. And I think actually knowing that you can trust your own instincts, and that's a lot about what your podcast is about, I think it's really refreshing, because you're not selling anything. You're kind of saying it's all within you already, and trust that it will come your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. And that is where the podcast is about, what the podcast is about. And really how I coach as well, because I think it's so easy, and I've done it, so I know, to kind of like just follow the path that we're given, like do all the right things. I think we're led to believe you do all the right things, you get this amazing prize at the end of it. And, I did all the right things. I went to university, I got a job, I got married, I had kids, and I had an absolutely terrible time in the middle of that. My marriage broke down. It was not an easy divorce at all. And, I pretty much lost everything at that stage. I kind of lost work, I lost jobs. We lost the family home. It looked as if I was at one point going to have to move back home with my parents and 2 kids, which is very kind of my parents, but it wasn't the life that I had wanted. And I just, again, I suppose that feeling of like, I was not going to let that happen. I mean, I did so much to ensure that that didn't happen. And I had in my head this life I wanted to build. And again, it's kind of start with the end in mind. It's like, right, I want to get to that. How am I going to do it? And it doesn't happen overnight. It does. I mean, I've become a lot more patient. You mentioned patience there. I don't think I was before all of that happened to me. I've become a lot more patient. But I do know what I want my life to look like. And I know the things that I want in it. So, and time is precious, right? Like time is like the most precious thing on this earth. We are all always saying we don't have enough time in our lives. We're busy. I hate the word busy. I hate it. It's like just a nonsense to me. Like, don't waste your life being busy. What does that mean? If you're busy, it's okay to have lots of work on if it's fulfilling you. But being busy is a nothingness. And yeah, I just where my time is spent is so precious. And I don't tend to watch a lot of TV and all of those things. My life is very simple. It's basically my kids, my friends and family, exercise, and my work. And those are the things that I care about, that I really care about. And I like that to be simple, and I like to keep that simple. And then outside of that, I just want a life that is full of things. Like, I want, in a naive way, I want to change the world. I want to make a difference. I want to leave a legacy behind. And I, want it to be full of interesting people that I meet along the way. And, I want to have that picture on the wall that I can't afford one day, I guess I'm very good at celebrating the very little things, because to build that, it takes time. It takes a really long time. And if you just want the end goal, you're just going to get depressed along the way. Like, you have to celebrate all the small things. And people either love this or they hate it. But like, we have a bell in our house, and every time one of us does something that we're really proud of, or that we think one of the others should be proud of, we ring the bell. And it's just like, it just keeps us, it keeps momentum going, and it just makes you feel like you're moving forward to the life that you want to step into.
Oh God, Rose, I love that, because I just think it's testament to, you maybe had a vision of your life a few years ago about what you wanted it to be, and that vision is now different, potentially better. And the way that you navigate that and don't look at it and maybe say, I'm looking at it from loss or any negative emotions, you've seen it as very much like a learning experience to say, we really going to celebrate every minute of this life, and to navigate that with kids and to really celebrate that between the three of you, I just think is amazing. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that. I think we're often sold this idea of what success looks like, and it's often financial. And actually, I agree with you, it's the simple things, and it's who is in your life and how you spend that life is far more important than potentially, what car you've got outside. And I just really, really feel like we need to have more people kind of saying that, especially at our age. I think for a younger generation, there's so much pushing them the other way and kind of telling them there's not enough unless they have this. And actually, it's great to kind of have successful women and saying you can have all that and it not necessarily be what you want it to be. And actually, on the other side of that, there's something so wonderful, and it's actually so simple. And it's about, like we said at the beginning of the podcast, knowing what you want because you're really aligned with your values.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I do believe that you can have money with that. I do believe that you can, if you want a comfortable life, then build a comfortable life and look at what the building blocks of that are. I think the best thing that's happened in the last sort of 10 years, it can be a bad thing, but is technology has just opened this up, and really lockdown as well changed the way that people work and interact in a working environment. And, I talk to my kids and I'm like, we talk about school a lot, and it's so, outdated. So much of what they're being taught at school is irrelevant for the lives that they're going to lead. And, it's the old joke, isn't it? When we were at school, everyone said, oh, you've got to learn maths because you won't have a calculator. And now we carry a phone around with us everywhere we go. And they're going to have that times 1,000, And really, the joy of technology is that you can be anywhere in the world doing whatever you want. And it's part of our career where we met, you were actually in Hong Kong, but I was in London, and it was very like you had to be there. And now you can build a career that you don't have to be there in that same way, and you can look at your balance of time in a much better way, and you can still build income, and more people build passive incomes and things. So I do kind of think that you can have both. But yeah, I think, well, it depends how important money is to you. But I think my values always start with, it starts with my girls, and then it's really the home and the life that I want to create for the three of us. And one of the things that's really important to me is travel, actually. And you do need a certain amount of money to do that. The car is not so important. My car is a disaster, I have to admit.
And I've got to say, Rose did the most amazing trip last year with your girls, which I absolutely loved, because you were just like, this has been like on the vision, I don't know, vision board, but this on the cards of what you wanted to do for so long, and you just went and did it, and you were like, just kind of went and shared that experience with them. And I think that was amazing, because there's a lot of people who would love to do that, but would be a bit scared of kind of going and taking that leap. And I remember being in your house and looking on your fridge and being like, oh, they're here today and they're there today, because you had a schedule of where you were going to be. So yeah, I think, like I said, I think you're such a role model for how you can kind of shape your own life, and how, like we've said, once you start to know and trust yourself, how that will kind of reveal more and more what you want out of it and how aligned you can be with it. I'm just aware that we're kind of coming to time, but I wanted to ask you if there's anything that I haven't asked, or that you wish I'd asked you, or anything that you want to say before we close the podcast.
I don't think there's anything you haven't asked, but just, yeah, I think it's so easy to get stuck in a system. And like have that, it's so easy to have that feeling that there must be more to life than this, and feel that, actually you should be grateful for what you've got. And I think it's good to have gratitude. And like I say, we ring the bell and it keeps momentum going, but actually you shouldn't let that stop you thinking that that's as much as you can have in life, and you should be grateful for it. Because the wonderful thing about human beings is that actually we have this innate sense of learning. Like, we can learn more and more and more. There's no limit to it. The only limit to it is ourselves, and we can kind of take ourselves in whatever direction we want to take ourselves in. And I would just say, I guess in the name of the podcast, follow yourself. Don't be worried about following yourself, because it can take you to the most incredibly wonderful places.
Amazing. What a note to finish on, Rose. But we will put links to your podcast. It's a brilliant listen. So many amazing guests on it. And I just want to say thank you so much. Definitely follow Rose on LinkedIn. She does some absolutely incredible work. And if anybody needs coaching, especially if you are stuck, and, I know many people within our industry, but also in different industries, do feel like that, contact Rose, because I think you just give such a great perspective on how there's another way to live.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely to see you. We've been back in contact for really quite a long time, but this is the first time I've actually seen you.